Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. We ready? Is everyone ready? Everyone who's here? Okay. Do people have the downloaded material? Cool. There's a lot of more text in this one. And we're going to end our evening together with the second video. I'm fairly sure that most people didn't watch either. But even if you watched one, I'm sure you didn't watch the two, right? Did anyone watch the second one? Okay, so the second one's a treat. It's an interview of a father and son discussing the idea of dual loyalties. That father and son happens to be the Kurtzer family. Ambassador, the doctor's Kurtzer. So we'll get to see that video at the end. There's a lot of people not on screen tonight. It's a little hard to be in conversation with folks not on screen. I totally understand, but it's harder. And welcome. Okay. We are getting into the heart of the matter. We have 5 more classes. We'll begin, of course, Suzanne always reminds me, we'll begin with the bracha of La'asok b'divrei Torah. So you're welcome to join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you to the Blessed Holy One for encouraging us to busy ourselves with Torah. That's how I translate la'asok, busy ourselves with Torah. So this unit, did anyone see any of the videos? Okay, so the unit explores the notion of dual loyalty and its impact on Jewish peoplehood. So dual loyalty may be something that you thought just came about when Judaism encountered modernity, the French Revolution, but we're going to see that it really goes back to the beginnings of our sense of what peoplehood is for us. Also, the idea of dual loyalty doesn't have to be terrible. Think about your own lives. So you have a loyalty to your spouse and your children and your parents. You have a loyalty to your community. Dual loyalty only becomes difficult when it becomes conflicting loyalties, right? When there's a conflict with how those two loyalties are seen. Bob Karp, we're happy to see your dog too. The accusation of dual loyalty has really accompanied the Jewish people from the very beginning and very first time when we are called a people. In its current manifestation, the idea of dual loyalty emerges because we have 2 homes. The issue is how Israel and how world Jewry can maintain a sense of togetherness while fully aware of the loyalty demands of a people, each in their own distinct homes. I'll ask you, when was this most difficult in the last maybe 30 years? What happened in like the 1980s, I believe is when it happened. The United States with a certain spy.
Pollard.
Pollock.
Pollard.
Right, the Pollard, which brought up that sense of not just dual loyalty, but conflicting loyalty. When we think about Pollard, I'll ask you first, do you remember, did you react? Do you remember how you reacted to it? Were you angry with him? Were you angry with, yeah, Moshe?
I was working at the American Embassy in Tel Aviv when that happened. I was working for the Fulbright Commission. And from the moment that happened, the way that they looked at us at the Fulbright Commission was completely different. We basically had free reign of the embassy, except to where the spies were at the top. But we could go see the ambassador's office. The minute that happened, we had to be escorted from the elevator to wherever we went. And that created just a tension that was palatable.
Yeah. Anyone else remember your reaction to Pollard? Yeah, Edna. You're on Zoom. You're on mute.
Sorry, but the way you phrase the question, so my answer will be, it's the same level. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember being angry because you would expect him, regardless what the secrets or the information that he claims that he passed on, to be loyal to his job and his status. So, in a way, I do remember anger or disappointment. Anger, yes.
Yeah, there was it's interesting. You were here already or no? You were in the States already or no?
No. I was in Israel.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll talk more about him a little bit later. So, as we know, we are a transnational people. We have a sense of belonging to a people which transcends states and borders. And we are also, since the French Revolution, citizens of the countries we live in. Before that, of course, Jews were not really citizens of the countries they lived in, but a very separate people. So we're going to study a couple different sources tonight, but in sections. First, we're going to study biblical, then Roman, and then modern to see how this idea of dual loyalty or conflicting loyalty has changed. So, dual loyalty and anti-Semitism. The accusation of you have dual loyalties has been used against Jews, actually, pretty much since the beginning of Judaism. So we're going to call up the text. Does anyone have the text in front of them? Someone want to read? Debbie, could you read the Exodus text? It's just a few short lines.
A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground."
Okay, what is significant first about the second verse in Hebrew? It's Vayomer el amo hine am bnei Israel. Am bnei Israel, the people of the children of Israel. The nationality, the peoplehood of the children of Israel. What's significant? This is the first time in the Torah that our people are designated as an designated as a separate group that is not just a clan, not just a family. Right before this, how were the Jewish people faring?
They were doing well.
Yeah, who brought us there? What was it like?
I didn't hear.
Who brought us there and what was it like for the Jewish people before this?
They were thriving and getting food. They had left Canaan under Yosef, and they had freedom. They were given the best land to choose from. So they were not discriminated against. They were considered, I guess, visitors. And now, under the new Pharaoh, he's looking at them as a threat.
Yeah, look, Vayakom Melech Hadash. And a new king arose who did not know Joseph, didn't know that Joseph was the number two, didn't know that Joseph had helped out, didn't know any of it. And he was suspicious. They're too numerous for us. They are in between us. What would happen? They might join our enemies and fight against us. We are called an a people, for the very first time in a negative context. It's not like, look at this beautiful people of the Jews. Look at the children of Israel. No. It's look at the children of Israel. They may attack us. That's the first time when we encounter. Okay, so let's go later on in biblical stories, unless anyone wants to say anything about Pharaoh.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
When it's some,
Jerry, we can't hear you. I can't hear. Can anyone hear Jerry? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jerry, can you try to unmute? Do you want to put it in the chat, Jerry? Was it Jerry talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can't hear him. I mean, we lost him.
Yeah, I think we lost him. I don't know. So if he gets back, Jerry Kaufman, are you there? Are you in Arizona? I don't know why we can't hear him. We miss you. Maybe you can put it, did he put in the chat what he was going to say? No.
Not yet. I think he was trying to reconnect.
Okay,
the
good.
audio.
Right.
Okay. Pharaoh is the first in the Bible to call us an a people, and he does it with a negative connotation. Kind of sad. We're going to move on to the next time we are called, we really see this idea of our people. So
back, by the way.
oh, could you, what was your comment?
Oh, did you hear my question?
We did
No.
not.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to know, when it said atsumi menu, doesn't that mean they are actually more, there are more of them than us?
Yeah, we're nervous about them. Yeah.
I mean, couldn't have possibly been more.
So, well, it's so that they don't become more.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Vahaya, so they don't become.
Oh.
I know that in modern Hebrew, it's past tense. In biblical, it's in the
No, I
future.
know.
Okay, so Esther, the book that we're getting ready to read, the difficult book that we're getting ready to read, but this is in the beginning, so it's not as difficult. This is my chapter, by the way. This is a chapter I chant every year. Anyone know why I chant it? Oh, Michelle, I think it's your chapter too, right? No? It's the best chapter. It has the first Haman. Everyone is still. Okay, so Vayomer Haman lemelech Achashverosh. Haman says to Melech Achashverosh, Yeshno am echad mifuzar miforad ben hamim b'chol medinot malchutecha. There is a certain people scattered around all of our peoples. They're insidious. They're not right in one place. There are a little of them here and they're there. B'chol medinot malchutecha. They're everywhere in our nation, in our malchut, in our kingdom. V'datehem shnot mikol am. And their daya, their opinion, their knowledge is different from everyone else's. Vetate hamelech einam osim. And they do not obey the king's laws. And, keep reading. And it is not in your majesty's interest to be okay with them. What is Haman saying?
if you're loyal to me, then it's not okay that you're forthcoming to them.
Yeah, if you're loyal, look, Haman is right. Haman is saying they're not loyal to you, Achashverosh. They have different opinions and different laws. They're different. They don't listen to you. They don't obey your laws. That's what he brings up. Mifuzar, Mifurad. We're all around and we're just different. Unlike other nations, which are concentrated in a single place, right? These people, the Jews, are kind of everywhere. They just are up there, and it makes it hard for us to know how to deal with you. Anyone have anything you want to say about this Esther?
No, I have a question.
Yep.
What is it in the English it says laws when in the Hebrew it's their opinions? So it's like they just added to it in the translation.
No, I think that it's not just, it's dot religion.
Yeah.
Right? And that means what you do.
Okay.
Like when we think of halacha, we think of dot. It's dot.
Yeah.
It's what you do in it. So I think the translation.
It's not the I, it's that.
Dot.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So Haman is exploiting the unique
I see. Yeah.
national character of the Jewish people to make Achashverosh and his other henchmen skeptical of us. We're unique, and so we're skeptical. Okay, let's go on to some stuff that maybe you haven't read. First century, the Common Era, cited by Josephus, historian. Who would like to read? On page 228. It's source 3.
Well, if no one else wants to, I can read.
Great, thanks. Jerry, are you in a warm place? Because we're all snowed in.
Yeah, very warm, actually. It's about 65. All right. You asked me.
Yep.
Apion, there being no separation of religion and state, argues that the Jews cannot be citizens inasmuch as they do not set up statues of the emperors and do not worship the same gods as the Alexandrians do. He also accuses the Jews of promoting sedition. Apion says, why then, if they are citizens, do they not worship the same gods as the Alexandrians do? Since, however, among you Egyptians there are such wide differences of opinion, why should you be surprised at us, a people who came to Alexandria from another country, if we abide by the laws established from the beginning concerning this matter? He accuses us also of causing sedition, but if he is correct in bringing this accusation against the Jews of Alexandria, why does he blame all of us living everywhere because we are known to be a harmonious people? And so Apion has attempted to denounce us on the ground that we do not set up statues of the emperors.
By the way, did anyone laugh at we are harmonious people? Whenever I read that, I'm like, really? Okay. Not really sure I agree with that part, but okay.
And so Apion has attempted to denounce us on the ground that we do not set up statues of the emperors, as if they were ignorant of this or needed Apion to defend them. As legislator forbade the making of images of any living creature, and much more so of God. He did not, however, prohibit the payment of other types of honors secondary to that paid to God in honoring worthy men, honors which we do confer upon the emperors and the people of Rome.
So right. So we can, what does he say we can do? We're not going to build a statue because our laws tell us not to do that, but we'll pay our taxes. We'll honor the men of Rome. Okay.
Yep. Last sentence. For them, we offer sacrifices continually, and we perform these ceremonies daily at the common expense of all the Jews. Does he mean by paying taxes? I don't know.
Yeah, it's paying taxes, but also giving honor tributes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how you're part of a people. You pay into it. So even here, first century, we see that because we don't observe in the same way, we are called out for it. Anyone want to say anything about the Romans? By the way, this is when we first see the term the Jews. Anyone know why? When Judea rebelled against the Roman Empire, the Jews living in Rome or elsewhere under its auspices were called then the Jews. They were connected with the Jews of Judea. Okay, so dual loyalty today stems from this problematic history of groups like ours trying to negotiate our belonging while retaining our own group's identity. How do we live in Egypt? How do we live in Persia, where if there was a place? How do we live in other places, maintain our own group identity without being called suspect by the larger power? Anyone want to say anything about these texts before we move into modernity? Okay, so the sikum, the summary of them is that we have a history, even from the very beginning, of being called a nation, that our nationhood is what gets us into trouble because we are different and we are among others. All right, I am skipping number 4, not because I don't want to do it, but I think we have a lot to get through and I want to keep getting through. And I think the Napoleon stuff and actually the Brandeis, Louis Brandeis is going to be the most interesting. Any lawyers here who want to read the Brandeis later? We have a few lawyers on tonight. Okay, so Napoleon's instruction to the assembly of Jewish notables. So what's the question? When France really becomes France as a modern state, we have the idea of how do you, after emancipation, have dual affiliation? We're finally going to be offered citizenship, which is not something that Jews in the Middle Ages were going to be offered, right? Scattered all over Europe. So now we have the real question of, well, what if we are given the option of being able to swear loyalty to a different government, to a citizenship that is secular? All right, who's going to read Napoleon's instruction, and then we have the answers. First, the questions. Quiet group tonight. Anyone?
Read it again.
Sure, Debbie, thank you. Does everyone have the text in front of you? I know that Suzanne put it in the, if you can't see it, she put it in the, good.
Yeah.
From Paul Mendez Flor and Yehuda Reinhardt's editors, The Jew in the Modern World, A Documentary History, 2nd edition.
You want to read the whole thing? It's in my office. It's long. Okay.
His Majesty, the Emperor and King, having named us commissioners to transact whatever relates to you, has this day sent us to this assembly to acquaint you with his intentions. The wish of His Majesty is that you should be Frenchmen. It remains with you to accept the proffered title without forgetting that, to prove unworthy of it, would be renouncing it altogether. And to us, our most ardent wish is to be able to report to the Emperor that among individuals of the Jewish persuasion, he can reckon as many faithful subjects, determined to conform in everything to the laws and to the morality which ought to regulate the conduct of all Frenchmen.
Okay, what is what is French citizenship asking of us?
Raise the law.
Yeah, observe the law, be Frenchmen. Okay, 230. We're gonna keep going because have any of you read this before? Okay, I love this section. It's so interesting. All right, keep going, Debbie.
One of the secretaries proceeded to read the following questions proposed to the assembly of the Jews by the commissioners named by His Majesty the Emperor and King.
Okay, so remember, here, set the scene. You have not been able to have citizenship because nobody is a citizen. Now we're going to have these modern states, and the French are inviting us into citizenship, but they're going to ask us some questions about our loyalties and our laws. Okay, go ahead.
Is it lawful for Jews to marry more than one wife? Is divorce allowed by the Jewish religion? Is divorce valid when not pronounced by courts of justice and by virtue of laws in contradiction with the French code? Can a Jewess marry a Christian or a Jew a Christian woman? Or has the law ordered that the Jews should only intermarry among themselves? In the eyes of the Jews, are Frenchmen considered as brethren or as strangers? In either case, what conduct does their law prescribe towards Frenchmen not of their religion? Do the Jews born in France and treated by the law as French citizens consider France as their country? Are they bound to defend it? Are they bound to obey the laws and to follow the directions of the civil code?
Okay, stop for a second. This is the first time in history where we're being offered this opportunity. I mean, we all take it for granted, right? That we are citizens of a nation state. But here, we're going to be treated as French citizens. And are we ready to die for that? Are we ready to defend it? Are we going to be bound to the laws and to all of the laws of the civil code? Okay, and now a question about our own rabbinic jurisdiction. Yeah, Stephen Sheriff, right? You're on mute.
I know.
What?
Now we're right. You can hear me?
Yes.
So this is 1806. What about 1789?
Why are you bringing it up? Why do you make
the United States?
Okay. Because here the questions get asked specifically in these ways in Europe. We could have brought that as well.
Well, I understand why you brought this up because this is unique in Europe or a first in Europe, but it is not the first time that Jews can become citizens.
Okay, corrected. You want to keep going?
What kind of police jurisdiction have the rabbis among the Jews? What judicial power do they exercise among them? Are the forms of the elections of the rabbis and their police jurisdiction regulated by the law, or are they only sanctioned by custom? Are there professions from which the Jews are excluded by their law? Does the law forbid the Jews from taking usury from their brethren? Does it forbid or does it allow usury towards strangers?
Right. So what is interesting and significant and different about this is that the questions are being asked specifically to the Jewish people and recorded. And then the answers come back. Who would like to read the answers?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Resolved by the French deputies professing the religion of Moses, that the following declaration shall precede the answers returned to the questions proposed by the commissioners of His Imperial and Royal Majesty. The Assembly, impressed with a deep sense of gratitude, love, respect, and admiration for the sacred person of His Imperial and Royal Majesty, declares in the name of all Frenchmen professing the religion of Moses that they are fully determined to prove worthy of the favors His Majesty intends for them by scrupulously conforming to his paternal relations, that their religion makes it their duty to consider the law of the prince as the supreme law in the civil and political matters, that consequently, should their religious code or its various interpretations contain civil or political commands, at variance with those of the French Code, those commands would, of course, cease to influence and govern them, since they must, above all, acknowledge and obey the laws of the prince.
Wow.
Then, stop?
No, I mean, stop because it's quite significant.
Yeah.
But this is what happened in, like Steve before said, in United States also. By being a citizen, you obey to the law of the country.
Here it's being written down by the Jews and saying, yes, they ask the questions and they're responding with, yes. Judy, yeah.
So this is all true in this country, except when it isn't. And we have situations certainly in Brooklyn, I mean, that's where I'm familiar with it, in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods where crimes are committed, but nobody is permitted to report them to the police because of this Talmudic prohibition on reporting somebody to the government. So there is a self-enforced governance in the ultra-Orthodox communities of various crimes, very serious crimes, rape and child molestation and very serious crimes. And if someone were to go ahead and report that to the police, they're then ostracized from the community. And I'm interested in what happened in France. Was there a separate sub-government that they weren't talking about? Or is that a modern phenomenon that this is being enforced? The prohibition against, I forget what it's called, Rabbi, you'll remember, against tattling to the government. Was that not enforced at the time, but it is again now?
So it's my understanding that it's a small then and now subset of Jews, very small, that we shouldn't take our understanding of a conversation about dual loyalty. They don't have dual loyalty.
No, they have loyalty only to themselves.
The same in Israel. It's the same.
Yeah.
Gam v'gam.
Right. So it's the same that this is about the majority of the Jewish people and not those on the edges. Right. And I would say that that's, and look, that is what happens here in France as well, that the majority of the community and not those who are the outliers on either side. And we don't, it's hard as a small Jewish people to not count each one, but we do know that they are a small group of outliers and don't represent most of Jewish history and how most of Jewish history has engaged. One of the things that when Edna said, well, it's the same thing in Israel, that is one of the things that is absolutely scary for many, many, many modern secular and modern dati observant Israelis, which is the ultra Haredi community. And I think we did spend on one of our sessions already a month or so ago speaking about how problematic those who are non-nationalists and who are on the edges of the community there are for the Jewish people in Israel. Same thing here. Same thing. Yeah. So what we hear is that the organized Jewish community who's communicating with the French community says, they, like all Frenchmen, have acknowledged no others. In the eyes of Jews, Frenchmen and their brethren are not strangers. They're just part of the community. So let's do the, let's go down. Yeah.
No, I was thinking along the line when you said it's the first time that they're asked, but I think that even at the time of the Talmud, I don't remember where, but Dina de Malchuta Dina. So the philosophy or the political philosophy, even the rabbis, was that the din, that the law of the kingdom eventually is a law.
Right, but those were political kingdoms that often, most of the time, were connected to a religion.
Yes, okay.
In the ancient world, and what makes the modern world different is these are theoretically secular states.
Yeah, they separate between religions, but I'm talking now about from the Jewish perspective, that I don't find it such a new approach from the point of view if they live in France and they are asked, yes, they would accept the din of the Malchut, which is France. That's what I meant.
Yes, and that goes back to what Judy brought up, which is those folks on the ultra Orthodox who are doing the terrible things that you state, not reporting rape and murder is it's just awful, and they are also going against what Jewish tradition would say with the Dina de Malchut.
Right, of course.
Which is why they're the outliers. They're not the majority of the community. We're not going to use them as the example for us. Okay, let's go down to the 6th question and answer. Do Jews born in and treated by the laws as French citizens consider France their country? Are they bound to defend it? Are they bound to obey the laws and to conform to the disposition of the civil code? Who would like to answer for the notable Jewish men?
Absolutely.
Wait, Mindy, because we got a new reader, and then Mindy will do one, and then Eleni. So Mindy, go ahead.
You're muted.
Mindy, you're muted.
Mindy, you're muted.
Yeah, I lost my document. I'm sorry. Someone else can do it.
Okay, Eleni, you're up.
Okay. Men who have adopted a country, who have resided in it these many generations.
Hey, hold on, Eleni. I want to give you one thing, which is pretend you're in Doc Gorvine's class and read it as if you were the speaking as the Jewish notable in France with a lot of gusto.
Oh, I need a different outfit, but I'll do my
own the document. Eleni and I had the same American history teacher in high school. So that's who I'm talking about.
Men who have adopted a country, who have resided in it these many generations, who even under the restraint of particular laws which abridged their civil rights, were so attached to it that they preferred being debarred from the advantages common to all other citizens rather than leave it, cannot but consider themselves Frenchmen in France, and they consider as equally sacred and honorable the bounden duty of defending their country. Should I go on?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Jeremiah chapter 29 exhorts the Jews to consider Babylon as their country, although they were to remain in it only for 70 years. He exhorts them to till the ground, to build houses, to sow, and to plant. His recommendation was so much attended to that Ezra, chapter 2, says that when Cyrus allowed them to return to Jerusalem to build the temple, 42,360 only left Babylon, and that this number was mostly composed of the poor people, the wealthy having remained in that city. The love of the country is in the heart of Jews a sentiment so natural, so powerful, and so consonant to their religious opinions that a French Jew considers himself in England as among strangers, although he may be among Jews. And the case is the same with English Jews in France. To such a pitch is this sentiment carried among them that during the last war, French Jews have been seen fighting desperately against other Jews, the subjects of countries then at war with France. Many of them are covered with honorable wounds, and others have obtained in the field of honor the noble rewards of bravery.
So different, right? When there's not a dual loyalty that you would have because there's a modern state of Israel. it becomes much more complicated when the loyalty is not only, are you loyal to Judaism and to France, but are you loyal to two different nation states? It's easier earlier in history for a Jew to be able to say this. And what we're going to read in the Brandeis stuff, I don't know if folks have read Brandeis's writings about this, but what we're going to read a little bit about is that it's easier for American Jews to hold up a dual loyalty with an emerging Jewish nation state when they aren't expecting themselves to go there and serve in its army or defend it. You'll see when he writes, when Brandeis writes this, that when American Jewry first thought about early Zionism, we were not Zionists, right? Zionism didn't begin here. It began in Europe. And conservative, reform, Orthodox Jews in America were later adopters of Zionism than were European Jews. We all probably could figure out why. Why is that? In America, I'm not running away from a pogrom in the early 1900s. My grandmother already ran away from a Cossack, and that's why she was in America, or my great-grandmother. So it's a different kind of dual loyalty that gets born. It's also, yeah, who's going?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. It makes me think of the Jews in Germany. Yes. When the Nazis came in, they couldn't believe that anything could happen to them because they were loyal German citizens. They fought in World War I. They won medals for bravery. And they were German first and Jews second, and couldn't accept the fact that Germany would turn against them. So
right. And here's another example to add to this that Yehuda Kurtzer talks about in one of the lectures, which is that in the 1930s, there were Germans living in Jerusalem, not Jews, just Germans living there, German Christians who had Nazi parties, who joined and created their own Nazi party because that was the national, that was what was going on in their homeland. They had a dual loyalty too. They lived in Jerusalem, but they were Germans. Okay, we're gonna
can I make a comment?
Please,
I don't think I'm jumping ahead, but I can tell you from personal experience in the late 50s and at least until the middle 60s, that many times, multiple times, I'll say, I was challenged by people who said to me, well, if Israel, and this is sort of like an adolescent type comment, but people would say to me, well, if Israel went to war with the United States, who would you fight for? That was a very common question in my
How many of you heard it? How many of you heard that in your lifetime? Of course. Right. I was thinking about that a lot actually last week, 2 weeks ago, because I and you are lucky that as American Jews, we have not really had to feel much distance, not that there isn't any distance, much distance in how our country relates to Israel. And how interesting and different it must be in the last few weeks to be a South African Jew. Whose government, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very different. I don't know about you, but in my Facebook feeds, the week of the court case, there were Lots of folks who were writing to our South African family, to our Jewish friends, stay strong, stay tough, and how hard it must have been during that. I mean, the only other time I can think about is about in partisan politics in the United States when the Iran deal was happening. But that became partisan within the Jewish community, and that we can talk about later. Let's talk about what Brandeis writes about the Jewish problem and how to solve it. Remember, Zionism didn't come early or as early to the United States as it did to Europe. Who went to Brandeis here and wants to read it, the Brandeis? Anyone here a graduate of Brandeis? We have no graduates of Brandeis? Okay. Anyone a lawyer and wants to read the Brandeis?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Let no American imagine that Zionism is inconsistent. Whoops, I just lost it. I touched my phone, and somebody else will have to continue because
We're going to do pop up. Next person, jump in.
Let no American imagine that Zionism is inconsistent with patriotism. Multiple loyalties are objectionable only if they are inconsistent. A man is a better citizen of the United States for being also a loyal citizen of his state, of his city, for being loyal to his family and to his profession or trade, for being loyal to his college or his lodge. Every Irish American who contributed towards advancing home rule was a better man and a better American for the sacrifice he made. Every American Jew who aids in advancing the Jewish settlement in Palestine, though he feels that neither he nor his descendants will ever live there, will likewise be a better man and a better America for doing so. Note what Seton Watson says. America is full of nationalities which, while accepting with enthusiasm their new American citizenship, nevertheless look to some center in the old world as the source and inspiration of their national culture and traditions. The most typical instance is the feeling of the American Jew for Palestine, which may well become a focus of his déclassé kinsmen in other parts of the world. There is no inconsistency between loyalty to America and loyalty to Jewry. The Jewish spirit, the product of our religion and experiences, is essentially modern and essentially American. Not since the destruction of the temple have the Jews in spirit and in ideals been so fully in harmony with the noblest aspirations of the country in which they lived.
Yeah, we are the New Jerusalem. New York is the New Jerusalem, right?
Okay.
Okay.
America's fundamental
Go to the
law.
last paragraph.
Jump to the last paragraph? Okay.
Yeah, that's the end part.
America demands rather that each American Jew become a Zionist. For only through the ennobling effect of its strivings can we develop the best that is in us and give to this country the full benefit of our great inheritance. The Jewish spirit, so long preserved, the character developed by so many centuries of sacrifice, should be preserved and developed further, so that in America, as elsewhere, the sons of the race may in future live lives and do deeds worthy of their ancestors. And unfortunately, there's nothing here about women. Noticing men and
yeah, we know. Yes, we're familiar with older writing. For Brandeis, he was able to articulate an integrated and a non-competitive relationship between Zionism and American patriotism. And that really has shaped much of the identity of American Jewry for 100 years. We know that in an age of partisan American politics in the last 25 years, that has gotten more difficult. We know that at the Jewish Center. We know that at our families' Thanksgiving tables. We know that partisanship on how Jews view America and how Jews view Zionism has made it more tense around our tables. Right? Zionism and Israel used to be a uniting force in the American Jewish community up until about what year for each of you? certainly up till 1967.
Actually, right, it says 1967, changed.
For those of you who had an acute awareness of what 67 brought with that victory, that with that victory also came occupation, then it became much more complicated. And even in 73, I would say that the American Jewish community was more monolithic than less monolithic in how it saw its relationship to Zionism. By 1982 and the Lebanon War, things had already changed for American Jews and for many of you, and for me as well, for all of us. We both are rooted in the Brandeis version of Zionism. I certainly am. While at the same time, understand that sometimes our own partisan politics mean that we want different things out of America. We want America to demand different things of its friend Israel. And we want different things out of Israel. American Jews have different interpretations of our Americanness in a partisan age. And we now live in a pretty partisan age where we can understand that dual loyalties can be questioned on either side. And the worst thing that can happen in a Jewish community, seems to me, is us questioning people in our own communities who believe differently about, not questioning their Jewishness and their commitment to the Jewish people and their commitment to Zionism even, by having different views of partisan politics. I know that. I'm going to tell you that this very week, I had someone in the congregation send me a defense of Bibi Netanyahu's government, and someone in the congregation send me that person believes, and someone in the congregation send me a speech from Peter Beinart. And both very much believe what is key is that we create space in our communities for us to not use our dual loyalties to divide us, and also that we allow ourselves to continue to be the Americans who are able to say things about our nation and our other loyalty. It would be easier, of course, if we all agreed, and we don't. It was easier to have a dual loyalty to Israel and the United States when we, as Jews, agreed for the most part. It's harder now. The harder part is to not think that the other Jew that believes differently is betraying either the American people or the Jewish people. Michelle.
I mean, it seemed to me that the Brandeis piece was really projection of an imaginary Israel, not a real nation state that had its own needs, its own people, and that would make its own decisions. So it feels like this view feels very dated to me.
It is. Yes, yeah. It's dated. But it is certainly how it is absolutely dated, but it's how many people probably till the 1980s, mid-1980s, which is before you were all grew up, right? You were all in college before the 80s.
Yes.
So or in the 80s. So that's the stuff we read. That's the bread and butter, but it's not where we are now. That is absolutely true. It is not where we are now. What does it mean to have dual loyalties? Yeah, Judy.
So
and then
when we were reading, oh, sorry, Rabbi.
Then we're going to listen to a lecture about dual loyalty.
Great. So when we were reading the Brandeis piece, I was remembering the election of John F. Kennedy. I was a kid when that happened. I was in high school when he was killed. But there was so much hoopla in this country about the potential for his dual loyalty. And what if the Pope told him X? He's Catholic and he would need to obey the Pope. And that was not an overt campaign issue. And I was a kid and didn't quite understand the whole thing, but I remember it very, very well as being a major issue at that time. So the question of dual loyalty was not unique to us.
And it's totally not unique to us. Go to World War II and the Japanese and their dual loyalties and terrible internment camps. And yeah, totally not. Eleni, and then I'm going to go back to, Eleni.
Thank you. I was just thinking about this notion of that things are more partisan now. And I've been reading lately, and I think many of you probably as well, about the history. And I think that that there was a lot of diversity and partisanship, all the way from the early yeshuv up to the state, and the synagogues that my grandparents were in had a lot of disagreement about Zionism, and there were many different approaches. The Bundists had a different view than others, and there was a lot of, I think so to say that this moment feels unique. I think I'm curious to look into that further, because I think I'm just not sure.
So I think there was, I definitely hear what you're saying, and that there were folks who, and I preface this by saying the reform movement came pretty late, as did the conservative movement, into Zionism in America. Zionism in America came later than Zionism in Israel. But by the 1948, right? By 47, Jews in this country were listening to the declaration of Jewish nationhood. Something about earlier Zionism, people came to Zionism.
Can I just add one more tiny oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But then they had the shock of both the reality that 6 million of our people were murdered, made it that only three years later, or 2 years later, right? You have 45, 46, 47, until the state gets declared and much of the community coalesces behind the state. So there may have been, and I said there was late acceptance in the United States. But once we get to the 40s and 50s, there was the groups you're talking about, at least in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, who didn't want a Jewish state and were Jewish, were outliers. We're not part of the large majority. Do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, and I know you want to move on, so I'm just I'm sort of thinking now about this notion of dual loyalty, which feels like an old-fashioned idea when you put it next to intersectionality and identity politics. I just kind of throw that out there. I'm thinking about that because now we're in a universe where intersectionality and different allegiances, and that a person has many parts, is kind of a part of some of the conversation. So I'm not even clear myself. It's this conversation that's encouraging me to put that language side by side, and at some other point think about similarities and differences.
So one of the points of the text from tonight are to think about how our multiple commitments, and it could be more than dual commitments, but multiple commitments,
right,
have created us complicated identities. But the anti-Semitism that the Jewish people have experienced and continue to experience in some places has a layer on it that happens when we are accused of this, not dual identity, but as we said, conflicting identities. Also, we're in a complicated time because Zionism and American Jewish political identities are all polarized. Identities in Israel about what the state should do and identities of who I am as an American are hard and polarized today. I want to give you a gift of listening to 20 minutes, so I hope you can stay on, of a video on what it might mean to have and to like live in this world of Jewish polarization. This is a video that goes with the series. Usually folks don't end up listening to the videos. This is the post one. If you don't end up wanting to watch it, I totally understand. If you want to come back in 20 minutes and discuss, or if you want to talk about how you're feeling about the world in 20 minutes, that's fine. This is an interview with Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer, who is now president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, and his father, who many of you may know from the community. So the Zoom master is going to play the video for us. Enjoy. But we don't hear it.
Hearing the sound.
We don't hear the sound, Suzanne. She'll try again.
Particular, and Israeli Jews as well, are supposed to navigate our competing commitment to belonging to the story of the Jewish people and being good citizens of the places in which we live. To explore this, we're joined today by Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, who throughout a 30-year career in the Foreign Service represented the United States in Israel and Egypt and other parts of the world, and had to address regularly as part of his career questions of what it meant to represent America, as well as to be in relationship to the Jewish people. Joining us now from Princeton is Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer. Hi, Abba. Thank you for being with us here today.
Oh, Suzanne, you know, we're not seeing the video.
So I want to hear from you.
Are any of you seeing the video?
That's a different video, I think.
You first about what it meant.
You're not seeing the whole thing.
No, we see just Yehuda, but not his father. Maybe it'll come back on. Keep going.
I don't know why. This is exactly what's on the.
Okay. Okay. We don't see his voice moving. Well, let's keep going for a bit and we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't, we'll scrap it and you'll see it yourselves.
Representing America in the world, as well as someone who was profoundly committed to your Jewishness, to the Jewish people, and to the story of what it meant to be a Jew in the modern world. What did it feel like, and what sort of challenges were raised for you by that experience?
Well, I lived in both worlds for much of my life, having attended Jewish day schools and then Yeshiva University, being very comfortable in my skin as a committed, observant Jew.
Yeah, Suzanne, we're not seeing the video.
I think all of them are like a kind of a podcast because I tried this afternoon and that's what I got too.
No, I mean, I watched it 2 weeks ago and then I watched it again today.
And it's on my screen, which is very strange.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. What do you see now on the screen?
We see the same thing that was there before.
I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Oh, it's Yehuda speaking, but not moving.
Well, it's paused.
Okay,
So,
you want to...
service. I decided in graduate school
to join
It's
the
still paused, Suzanne. It's a different video, I think.
I'm not sure what to tell you. Let's see.
Do you want to unshare and start it again?
Okay, give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think it was at minute, I think I told you a minute 23. Yep. Yeah.
Suzanne, should everybody mute during this
Yes.
during the video?
Today we're talking
That
about
can't hurt.
loyalties and competing loyalties, and the questions raised by the modern Jewish experience of emancipation, and especially the creation of the State of Israel.
Let's see if this will work. Sorry, guys.
Of how diaspora Jews in particular, and Israeli Jews as well, are supposed to navigate our competing commitments to belonging to the story of the Jewish people and being good citizens of the places in which we live. To explore this, we're joined today by Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, who throughout a 30-year career in the Foreign Service represented the United States in Israel and Egypt and other parts of the world, and had to address regularly as part of his career questions of what it meant to represent America, as well as to be in relationship to the Jewish people. Joining us now from Princeton is Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer. Hi, Abba. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Huda. It's good to talk to you.
So I want to hear from you first about what it meant to be both an American Foreign Service officer representing America in the world, as well as someone who was profoundly committed to your Jewishness, to the Jewish people, and to the story of what it meant to be a Jew in the modern world. What did it feel like, and what sort of challenges were raised for you by that experience?
Well, I lived in both worlds for much of my life, having attended Jewish day schools and then Yeshiva University, being very comfortable in my skin as a committed, observant Jew, and also very committed to public service. I decided in graduate school to join the Foreign Service, took the exam, passed it, and entered right as soon as I finished my PhD. And I really felt at that time no particular contradiction between the lifestyle that I had, the commitment I had to the Jewish people and to my religion, but also my commitment to the United States and our national interests.
You mentioned that the going into public service sounded like an extension of your Jewish upbringing. To what extent do you think for you, and if you want to extrapolate for American Jews also, do you think that public service or service to America more generally is not just a thing that some Jews do, but might actually be a core feature of what American Jewishness makes possible?
Well, you know, back in the day, in my education, we did a lot of civics in school, understanding what it was to be an American, the idea of America. And it was a very short bridge to navigate from understanding this idea of America as supposed to be something of an example for the world in terms of democracy, respect for human rights and liberty, and what our tradition had taught us as individuals, as Jews, reaching out to the poor and to those who were in greater need. So I never saw a contradiction, but actually saw it as a complement to what I was doing in both directions. As a Jew and as an American citizen, acting this way just seemed to make a lot of sense. And frankly, without having given a lot of deep thought, it just was an extension of lifestyle.
So I would assume that many people over the course of your career, especially at the time when you were representing America in Israel, assumed that your loyalty to America and your loyalty to Israel would pull in different directions. And I'm curious whether you ever felt that they were actually pulling in different directions, and if there were moments when you felt you had to navigate or make a choice between either of those primary loyalties.
Oh, there's no question. I felt it right from the beginning. My first assignment overseas in the Foreign Service was Cairo from 1979 to 82. And I joined the American negotiating team for what was called the autonomy negotiations that flowed from the Camp David Accords. And the first meeting I walked into, the Israeli delegation kind of huddled and they were looking at me. And then later somebody said to me that the question was, Mishalanu, is he one of us? And of course that has two connotations. One is he Jewish? But also, is he on our side? And so, I smiled at the time and I said, I'm very proud to be Jewish and I'm representing the United States. And, it was kind of understood. But I think there was always a sense on the part of at least some people in Israel that an American Jewish diplomat would have to bend over more favorably toward Israel. And, the fact is the United States and Israel have such a great relationship that even during some of the crisis periods, we got along very well. But navigating that perception on the part of some Israelis was sometimes a challenge.
It's interesting that you say that Israelis perceived that an American diplomat would bend over on the side of Israel. I assume that in the back of your mind, there also is an assumption that other Americans would assume that you'd have to actually bend over backwards in order to not show yourself as kind of tipping your hands to Israel. Was that something that you felt you experienced in your career?
Well, the more interesting part was that the same assumption existed on the part of the Egyptians in my first assignment. The assumption was, well, if you're Jewish, you must be representing or supporting Israel. And in a sense, the two perceptions of the Israelis and Egyptians helped keep me grounded because I knew what I was doing. I was representing the United States of America. Our policy was clear. I had a chance to argue for what I thought was right in that policy, but I also had an obligation once the policy was decided to carry it out. It's a little bit less clear as to whether or not the Americans with whom I worked had this perception. I think at the beginning of my career, it was probably somewhat pronounced because the State Department at that time was in a transition. There was a lawsuit on the part of Black Foreign Service officers, a lawsuit on the part of women Foreign Service officers, and the State Department, which had traditionally been seen as a kind of upper crust, Ivy League, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant institution, was changing. And I was part of that change, coming in not only as a Jew, but also as a committed Jew, which had its own dynamics in terms of being able to fulfill obligations, eating and working 7 days a week if necessary.
In the lecture, I alluded to the fact that the accusation of dual loyalty is a long-time anti-Semitic accusation against Jews, but it also is something that that Jews use on other Jews as well. And I talked about the ways in which those two things feed on each other. When we become skeptical of our own loyalties, it invites others to become skeptical of our loyalties. And I'm wondering whether you think that the American experience, that part of the reason it's so difficult for us to process it is that maybe the American experience has actually been exceptional in the ways in which Jews can be really Americans, really powerful as Americans and also Jews. Do you experience that? Do you understand through your understanding of America that there's something exceptional about the Jewish experience of America in that respect?
Oh, I think that's very much the case, and particularly so in the last, let's say, quarter of a century. If I go back to the beginning of my professional career, I think there was an element of doubt on this issue. But in the last 25 years, that element of doubt has been removed almost entirely, except in two places. Number one, I think on the part of some Israelis who still don't get it about the American Jewish community, that we can live in these two worlds and live so comfortably. And I think there's now part of the Jewish community, and if I could say so, part of the Orthodox Jewish community that may have that same doubt. Some of the hate mail that I've gotten over the years, either from right-wing American Jews or from right-wing Orthodox American Jews, betrays the idea that somehow we can't be part of the power elite without having given up something of our Jewishness. I think that's foolish. I think people in Israel who believe that don't understand America, and I think that part of the community in America that believes it has not experienced it, and therefore they don't understand it as well.
What has to happen in the American Jewish story to hold on to this? Because one of the things I alluded to in the lecture is that the the kind of Brandeis Covenant. Zionism is consistent with American patriotism. And what you're talking about in terms of American exceptionalism suggests that Jewishness and Americanness can be kind of enduringly compatible. But we're also seeing that Americans are pulling apart from each other in profound ways. The fights inside the Jewish community about pro-Israel, the alliances that we create. How does the whole partisan culture challenge this story? And what do you think we have to do as Americans and as Jews to try to hold to the kind of golden mean that you were alluding to before?
I think there's several things that are high on the agenda of what needs to be done. One of them, if I could be very blunt, is that there should never, ever be another Pollard. A case that was so extraordinary in the mid-1980s that left an impact throughout the national security community and re-raised this question, which I think was in the process of finding a way not to be raised. Number two, I think the American Jewish community has to find a way back to its own bipartisanship between the Republican Jewish, whatever it's called, the Jewish Political Committee and the Democratic Political Jewish Committee. There is such a wide gulf that they have taken on the stripes of the two parties they represent rather than trying to find some common ground. And then the third issue is the larger question of partisanship within the American political community. There always has been and always will be partisanship on domestic politics. There has always been some partisanship on foreign policy, but it is now far worse on foreign policy than I experienced during my years in government or since. In fact, when interviewing members of Congress a few years ago for one of the books that I wrote, one of the remarkable things that emerged was that Democrats and Republicans alike said to me that as long as an administration's policy vis-a-vis the peace process in Israel was relatively sound, they would give the president a chance to play it out with a little bit of advice from the side. That doesn't exist today, and it doesn't exist largely because of the partisanship that has infested and infected our national security policy as well as our domestic policy.
So given that partisan divide today, there was always that hypothetical scenario of American policy being so opposed to Israeli policy that we would have to choose sides, so to speak. And we had examples, obviously, over the past 30 or 40 years where the American administration and the Israeli administration were on different sides of an issue. The loan guarantees is a famous one. And those seem to have resolved itself before American Jews had to make this choice. Do you think that the current partisan conditions are likely to create a situation in which we're going to reach a much more intractable place, that a prime minister and a president are not just not fully aligned, that it's not just the existence of some daylight, but that there's such a profound political divide between them that American Jews are forced to make a choice?
Look, I'm nervous that we, in fact, are reaching the point where this is a very different political divide. I was working in government in the administration during the time of the loan guarantees and the settlements question. And it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. But at the end of the day, the Israeli government and the US government and Arab governments agreed to go to the Madrid Peace Conference. In other words, we didn't let our larger set of interests intrude or be affected by a difference of view on one issue. Today, it's hard to see that kind of understanding on the big picture when the nastiness and the vituperations going on in both directions have become so severe. I think both sides have to do some soul searching. And I would include both the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States, both of whom, in a way, have turned this issue into a punching bag. And frankly, I would include the State of Israel, which, at least since the time of our disputes over the Iran nuclear agreement, have been playing domestic politics here in a way which has exacerbated this divide and made it hard to see whether or not we can overcome it at some point.
So given the fact that our conversations here are called Together and Apart, are about the relationship between Israeli Jewry and American Jewry, and the challenge of retaining some measure of togetherness, even as we're not trying to collapse them both into one place. You alluded before to some of the requests you might want to make of American Jewish institutions, the Republican Jewish Coalition, the Democratic Jewish Committee. What would you advise Israelis who are engaging with this question? How would you advise them? What do they need to understand about American Jewish identity vis-a-vis America and vis-a-vis Israel that will enable them to stay in a different place, even when they feel frustrated that American Jews are not kind of towing the Israeli administration's line on this issue or the other one?
I think more importantly, in terms of policy, both Israel and American Jews need to find a way to develop a new, maybe you call it social contract, wherein Israel as a sovereign independent state has got to have the independence to make decisions related to its security, its economy, and its politics. But it doesn't have that independence with regard to issues related to Jewish life, Jewish identity, who is a Jew, marriage, divorce, halachic questions. And I think that social contract, or whatever you want to call it, really needs to pervade both communities. American Jews may have a viewpoint about Israeli policy. I certainly do. I continue to write op-eds. But I also have a strong degree of respect for Israel's independent right to make its decisions. It's living as a country, and it makes those decisions based on its evaluation of what needs to be done. But the Israeli people and government also need to understand that when they take decisions about which rabbis can perform a conversion or can certify a divorce or define who is a Jew, that impacts me in a manner that I can't vote. And that's why we need some understanding that goes in both directions, and I think would help settle some of these problems.
It's interesting because I had assumed that one of the requests that we might make of Israelis, and I'm not sure that you would agree, is also that American Jews may take political stances vis-a-vis Israel that run against, run counter to that of Israelis. There was the controversy a few years ago of the struggle between, in the American Jewish community, which was overwhelmingly in support of President Obama vis-a-vis the Iran deal, and Israelis who were overwhelmingly opposed. And Israelis argued it was a Jewish peoplehood issue. The failure to adhere to the Israeli government position was one in which we were disregarding Israelis' existential concerns about their own security. Do you think that that covenant of peoplehood includes responsibilities by American Jews to shift our loyalties? Even though American Jews overwhelmingly voted for and supported Obama, would they have had to take a different position because Israelis indicated that the issue related to them in a way that related to American Jews differently?
Oh, absolutely not. If people try to define, for example, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal, in terms of, existential peoplehood, I think they're doing a disservice to the idea of peoplehood, and they're putting Jews outside of Israel in an untenable position. A strong argument was made and could be made that the Iran nuclear agreement was actually good for Israel's security. There were Israeli security experts, both former generals, former heads of the security service, and others who made that argument. So it's an argument that has two sides. And once you try to black out the alternative arguments by claiming peoplehood and existentialism, you're doing a great disservice to both. And I don't think it's helpful to the security of Israel to try to deny to Americans generally or to American Jews the right to articulate a view. I'll give you one example in the other direction. In the 1990s, when there were very serious negotiations underway involving Israel, the Palestinians, with the United States as a third party, there were some Israelis who tried to lobby the American Congress to threaten to cut off aid if Israel gave up, for example, the Golan Heights. So it's as absurd for them to have done that as it is to argue that Americans should not articulate their policy views on issues related to Israel and Israeli politics. What I said earlier is at the end of the day, you have to be respectful of Israel's right to make its own decisions. But that should not cut off the debate or the policy arguments that take place before those decisions get made.
So you make a strong argument both in terms of your own professional commitments and in how you articulate the need really for American Jews to be able to articulate our own strong political commitments to America, that it doesn't have to be in conflict with our Jewishness. We talked earlier about partisanship. We talked about the demands that Israelis make. I guess I'm curious, given that we are the inheritors of this Louis Brandeis story of the compatibility between our Zionism and our Americanness, what in this partisan climate makes you optimistic about the future of American Jews trying to navigate these political positions? What would you give us as a kind of positive future view of what we need to do to try to hold on to some sense that these loyalties can be complementary and don't have to be competing?
I'll put it in personal terms. I still do a lot of public speaking at universities, Jewish community centers, synagogues around the United States. And invariably, someone will come up to me before my lecture. First of all, they tell me, "Are you Yehuda Kurtzer's father?" And that, of course, makes me most proud. But they invariably will say to me, "You know, this is a conservative political congregation or political audience, and please be careful." You know, I listen to them respectfully, and then I say what I say, which is very often critical of American policy, critical of Israeli policy, critical of Palestinian policy. And at the end of the day, everybody comes up to me, literally everybody, and says, "You know, that was very thoughtful and you gave us a lot to think about." Doesn't mean that I converted anybody. That was not my purpose. It doesn't mean that people didn't go home with their own views, the same views they came with. But I think there's still a lot of diverse, pluralistic thinking within the American Jewish community, even on these very strongly held issues. That gives me hope that you know, we will get over this period of intense partisanship. I think parts of the right-wing American community, the Orthodox American community, have to do some soul searching as to where their views lie and, you know, where their center of gravity is. And I think we're going to make it. I think the strong majority of American Jews are comfortable in their skins as Americans. They're comfortable in their skins as Jews, and they're very comfortable in their skins as pro-Israel, no-nonsense supporters of the State of Israel.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Yehuda.
Brought some local color back. How many of you are friends with him? Edna, you want to unmute?
No, I just reacted that I know him from Princeton University, and my daughter usually, when she was a student here, she did the Purim debate, so she would recruit him. So we know him as a part of the community, but not a friend.
Yeah. I mean, maybe what Eleni had said earlier is right, that it's so different that we don't think about dual loyalty in the same way, and that we have so many multiple identities. But
what
I think that folks get that the place where the dual loyalty question, the dual loyalty question does still come up.
Well,
I just wanted to say that it's connected to your remark before, that there is a huge difference talking about the dual identity, and Kurtzer emphasized it. I mean, you could understand it from his presentation, but he summed it up at the end, that most of the Jewish American people feel comfortable in their skin as American Jews. And this is completely different than having this constant dual conflict. Let's say if you are a Russian Jew, or even today, maybe a Jew in Finland or in Holland even, or South Africa. Yeah, so he summed it up very I think realistically that right now, so far, I think that also the political atmosphere in the United States is changing for different reasons. And what I was surprised about, not surprised because I know him for many lectures and representations, but along the whole conversation, he didn't talk about himself as a Zionist. He all the time mentioned the Jewishness.
Yeah, it's interesting.
His religious identity, how comfortable he feels to be a Jew in the United States and to serve United States of America according to his belief, education, etc., and loyalty. So this was, I'm saying in parentheses, I don't know what he would say if you would push him. No, keep on Brandeis style that, what about putting together your Zionistic approach or Zionism versus an American policy or whatever Israeli policy. So
right. That's quite perceptive and so interesting. And I think I'm gonna write Yehuda about it and ask him about it.
No, because his presentation, you could feel comfortable with him.
Yeah.
You know, but this is, the issues today are shifted, especially when in United States nowadays you have also strong Muslim organization, Muslim lobbies. They're affecting also political decision. It wasn't like that 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So things are getting very complicated. I think Kurtzer represented indeed the time that he grew to his role, and also the comfort zone that he's living, that he can give lectures as, I'm a proud Jew, I can practice my Judaism, I feel comfortable, and it's okay to express my opinions. So, yeah.
And I,
yeah, Jerry.
Just to add a little bit more complication to everything. And this has nothing to do with October 7th, but my identity with Israel, the state of Israel, is very strong. But my identity with the government of Israel, as it is right now, is very weak, to put it mildly. But in November, my identity with the American, whoever, the powers that be after November in America, my feelings may change radically about, so in other words, we're not only conflicted, or speaking for myself, about identity with a country, but also with who's running the country as a separate issue. And then there's also another thing which has to do with how strongly Jewish people identify with being Jewish today versus, let's say, 1948 or 1968. There's many Jews who don't really feel the same kind of attachment to being Jewish that they used to feel. So that's a whole other issue.
It is a whole other issue and certainly interesting. And we've seen an incredible resurgence, sadly, in Jewish identification in the United States since October 7th.
Right.
I am sure, Jerry, that many people on this Zoom feel similarly to how you feel in terms of feeling a closeness to our country, but not necessarily to its government, both Israel or the United States at any one given time, depending who's in office. Judy Shapiro.
Just a quick question. When was this interview?
2019, right before COVID. So old already.
Yeah, I figured it was older when he said something about a few years ago with Obama,
Right.
So I figured it had to be older.
Okay, I'm gonna stop now